Welcome to Beacon Bits. I'm your co-host, Serge Boudreau, and every episode I will be joined by my co-host, Yves Boudreau. We delve into the world of work from the employer and employee viewpoint. Kick back, relax, and let's talk work. Beacon Bits starts right now. Welcome to Beacon Bits. I'm your co-host, Serge Boudreau, and as always, joined by my other co-host, Yves Boudreau. How's it going, Yves?
It's doing all right. It's been a while since you and I have been able to do this.
Yeah, you broke your leg. Like, what were you doing that you broke your leg? How does that happen at the old age that you're at?
I was hoping to get the call-up for the Four Nations Cup in January. So in my beer league that I play in, I was going, fairly fast towards the board, and I lost an edge, and then hit the board in ways that in my 20 years of playing hockey that I've never done before. And then my leg got caught underneath me, and I ended up hearing a lot of cracking noises. So I knew right away it was bad. And so I ended up with 2 fractures and a break. So my ankle, essentially the ball joints on both sides, that bone, both of them fractured.
Oh.
And then the fibula.
So you're on the IR, and you know what? Just that story, because I hadn't heard what happened, makes me rethink my coming out of retirement. I've been asked to play in a couple of beer leagues and in a tournament, and I'm like, I'm getting my gear ready. Okay. But you saying that, and you're a very similar age than me, I think I might be too old. I can't break my leg at 3 parts.
I'm going to be back on the ice in May. So I'm done with my cast in 2 weeks, and I'm starting rehab with the goal of playing a tournament in May. So I don't know.
Why? Why not? Like, it's not the money. It's definitely not the glory, because
Olympics next year. What do you mean? Why? I love it. It's my it's how I stay sane in the winter here. And so I'm not done. Like, it would have to be, I don't know, it would have to be something more than just 3 little fractures for me to stop. No, I only missed half a day of work throughout all this. I haven't stopped, but yeah, I'm not as comfortable working as I normally would be. But yeah, I'll be good. This is coming off in 2 weeks, and then I'm back to 100%.
Well, talking about hockey, I'm assuming that you watched the finals between Canada and US in the Four Nations Cup. It felt like Canada was playing for more than just hockey glory. It felt like we're playing for our sovereignty. I have never been, it's been a long time that I've been as nervous watching a hockey game. And I had tons of friendly bets with Americans, which I'm glad I won. And the whole tournament was
it was a perfect storm. Like, it was just so many things leading up to it that I don't know that it's nearly as successful if it's not for the volatility that was building up. It was actually nice to see for a short period of time, having Canada itself not be as divided that we've seen in recent years. Like, to actually see everyone cheering and looking for the same outcome was pretty cool. I would say it's probably one of the best situations that I've been in. I was actually at the bar with friends to see the game, and everyone was singing "Oh Canada," and I'm actually kind of got little shivers because I could see how proud people were. And I think it's probably the coolest game since the gold medal game in Vancouver years ago, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think if we look back, growing up in the early 80s, my dad would always talk about I forget what it's called, the Summit Series between Russia in 1972, and the Paul Henderson goal is like kind of lore in Canadian history. And I think 20 years from now, 30, 40 years, we're going to look at this series very similar. That Connor McDavid goal is going to be part of highlights forever as we remember the 87 Canada Cup, like Mario Lemieux, Wayne Gretzky goal, the Sidney Crosby goal. So it's going to go down in history here in Canada as one of our proudest moments. I didn't go anywhere. I was watching the game with my daughter, and she really doesn't watch hockey that much. And when they scored, I just went crazy, like jumping up and down. And she thought I was insane. She went to tell my wife, I'm like, I don't know what Dad is doing, but he's like crazy. I've never seen him like that.
It's funny because you know this. I'm pretty even keel all the time, and I was actually like cheering. Like I was like in the moment. It was really cool. Yeah, I think Canada needed that moral boost or morale boost, I should say. Leading up to it, I felt like everyone was pretty deflated. Honestly, sports is good to unify people. That's my
Oh, absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
maybe we just need more sports in our lives and less politics. But that's
I agree.
probably
I
not
agree.
what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, we'll be talking a little bit about Trump and the tariffs at the end of this episode. But I think to your point, it was a great morale boost. I think we all feel great about being Canadians. Our national pride was definitely in play there. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
I was glad to see it. But let's jump into what's trending in the news. And my friend, well, I like to call him my friend because he's pretty rich, but Mr. Jamie Dimon, who's the CEO at JP Morgan, had, I guess, a rant that he had with his employees go viral as the audio leaked. And I figured let's play the audio and then let's talk about it.
Not reading your stuff, and if you don't think that slows down efficiency, creativity, creates rudeness and stuff, it does. Okay. And when I found out that people are doing that, you don't do that in my meetings. You're going to meet with me. You got my attention. You got my focus. I don't bring my phone. I'm not saying text to people. Okay. It simply doesn't work. And it doesn't work for creativity. It slows down decision making. And don't give me the work from home Friday works. I call a lot of people Friday. They're not a person you get a hold of.
Obviously, he had a lot to say there, and I think he's pretty frustrated with working from home, and he always has been. And I think this has been the case for most major CEOs, especially banks. But a couple of things that stood out to me is like, don't talk to me about working from home on Fridays, because on Fridays I can't get a hold of anyone using expletives.
Can't get a hold of any fucking one or
Yeah, pretty much. But it was bleeped out, obviously, in this audio. Do you understand the frustration that he's feeling? And do you think it's fair what this audio leaked actually shares?
Oh, it's a tough one. I mean, I'm a fan of in office. We have people in our team that are not in office, but generally I love the energy. It's just so different. And it's so different when you walk in every day and you see, the full team versus you walk in every day and you see 2-3 people in the corners of the office with headphones on. It's night and day in terms of like the energy and the conversations are happening. And I think as a CEO of a company at that scale and where the expectation you have for people who are at that particular level in the world, you got to be better than that. And I just think it kind of tainted his image a bit amongst other things that he might be blamed for. But yeah.
Well, that's a good point. But listening to it, obviously, there was team members and people of the company, and you could hear some laughing and some kind of agreeing with him. Obviously, he's the CEO, so people would be laughing and agreeing in the same room.
Yeah.
But he wasn't wrong. There's a lot of organizations that on Fridays it's almost impossible to reach anyone. The other thing he talked about is multitasking during Zoom calls. I know that happens all the time. I've done that, especially if the call is really boring. And I think we've all gone through a lot of Zoom calls, and I still have as I work remotely, and it gets daunting. I'd rather have face-to-face meetings any day than like 6 Zoom calls. So I get it, right? Like I get why people multitask, and I get why CEOs would think it's a pain in the ass when you're not actually focused on what's being talked about.
Like I have a broken leg and I've been going in the office 2 to 3 days a week. Like I've obviously been working more from home in the last 5 weeks since I've got the cast on, but it just validated for me that I'm not wired to just sit in an office and be on Zoom calls all day. Like I just don't get energized from that. And unfortunately, like if someone, doesn't agree with it, then go look for other opportunities because in the end, it's the people that are running the company. And it's also on us that we may risk losing good people. In some cases, you might get better talent if you went remotely, but does it offset having the right company atmosphere?
Well, I think what we're seeing is a little bit of a pushback from the cultural shift of the last 3 to 4 years where everything is about work-life balance. And I get that. Like, I'm not going to criticize anyone saying work-life balance is important. You shouldn't like kill yourself for a company. But the flip side to it, and if you want to work for a company like JP Morgan, you're going to work hard. You're going to work long hours, but you're also going to have the prestige of having worked at JP Morgan as you progress your career for an investment bank. Like, that's a really good thing to have on your resume, like your Goldman Sachs, all of these companies.
Totally.
But you know what you're getting yourself into before you go work at a company. They are very vocal of what their priorities and how it is to work there. So you can't go work there and then start complaining, oh, well, they're not allowing us to work from home on these days. I'm not getting the work-life balance. That to me is employment brand. Like, what's important in employment brand is give me a clear picture of what it is there, and I can decide if I want to work within that environment or not. I think Jamie Dimon just highlights how he thinks it should work. And to your point, if you don't want to work there, don't work there.
And so for me, it's like, okay, which version are you? Because for me, I'd rather put in the work now so that I can determine and decide how I want to spend the majority of my professional and personal life afterwards.
Well, that's such a good segue to the next what's trending in the news. And I'll give you the key highlights. So there's a recent survey that looked at every generation and asked them, what amount of money do you need to make to feel successful?
Mm-hmm.
And the results were jarring to me in a lot of ways. So boomers and Gen X came in around $100,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
Gen Z believes that they need nearly 600,000 per year to be financially successful. So, like, I'm going to give credit to Gen Z compared to boomers and Gen X. So when we grew up, the money that you needed to make to be able to afford a house, the cost of living was a lot less than it is now.
Mm-hmm.
But flipping that around into think that $600,000, which would put you definitely in the 1% of all earners, is not realistic in any way. There's many reasons that we might think that, right? Like, I think they live in a world of social media that glorifies these luxury lifestyles. They see these people with these private jets. They see all this and they think that is realistic, or I even should say that is real. And most of the time, that's not real. It's playing for the cameras. But were you shocked by this? Because I was.
I was not, because I know a lot of people in both those generations, because I'm smack in the middle of it. I was definitely not shocked at the 100K. I thought the 600K was higher. I would have estimated 400,000. If you think about our parents or grandparents, every prior generation, they had less and less than we did. And every time parents, when they have kids, then they also want to make sure that their kids also have more than they might have had. So like even my parents, like they sacrifice their own personal wealth and things they could have done for themselves just because they want to make sure that the kids are.
They must be pretty disappointed now, though.
But, and then you see parents my age, like they even want their kids to have even more than they did. And so to me, it kind of all goes to the parents, but it also just shows you that like Gen Z just doesn't have the life experience yet to understand the value of a dollar. And I sound like an old man when I say, oh, the value of a dollar. But it's true. I had family members who basically want to do certain careers because of the money, not because they actually want to do it. Or what they think that they should be paid hourly today for basic functions. It's unreal. But they're going to get a reality check pretty quickly once they realize that whoever they're following on social media that's painting that picture, probably going to realize that it's 1% again.
Well, I think we all at one particular point got a reality check of how the real world works. What we were talking before about, like, you sometimes have to build the foundation for you to be able to make that money in the future. So sometimes you have to work really hard, 10, 15 years to get the skill, to get the knowledge, to be able to start a company, do something that will actually put you in a position that you can make a whole lot of money, you have to sacrifice at one particular point either your lifestyle as far as going out and partying every night. Instead, you're actually working at your computer. Like there's all these sacrifices that you have to make to be able to be one of those top earners. But like even the context, a doctor makes $350,000 to $400,000 a year on average.
Yeah.
So you're expecting to make $600,000 a year, which is almost double what a doctor makes. Like, where does that come from?
Yeah, I would argue though that the other side of the spectrum is, I think the result of those surveys is also an indication of self-worth as well. So
In what way?
if you're saying, hey, like, I'm okay with $100,000, that's what I need to be comfortable, then that's kind of the ceiling that you set for yourself. Because like to me, if you're asking me today, my number would not be 100,000. It wouldn't be 600,000, but like I would actually want to set a higher ceiling for myself. So like, so in some ways, I kind of like the 600 because they're not saying that they deserve to get paid 600. They're saying that's what they want to have to be. So then go work for it and go get it. So I'm not opposed to this. I actually kind of like the 600K, but no one's going to give you 600K without putting the work in. So create that opportunity for yourself. But you're a boomer, so you probably relate to the 100K.
I'm definitely not a boomer. I'm younger than you. So just to put that in perspective, okay, good point. I agree. Like if you want to set your goal that for me to be successful, I need to make $600,000. There is a high likelihood that you are going to disappoint yourself, but that's okay. As long as you know that and you're going to strive for that and do everything possible, but you have to be aware of what needs to get done for you to be able to achieve that success. Like you're really going to have to put yourself out there and not be afraid that you might fail at some of the things before you actually get to the success that drives it. So it doesn't happen overnight. But to your point, like, hey, we should all have goals. And if they can get to 600,000, great. But you're going to need to work for it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's jump into the big topic. And we've talked about the tariffs in our last podcast episode, and the constant threat of tariffs puts us in a position that we're still heavily reliant on the US. And there was a recent article that I pulled up here that I thought was fantastic because basically what it says is Trump is doing Canada a big favor. And what he means by that, and it forces us to not rely on the US or anyone. It's actually shocking as you start digging into and looking at, we have 10 provinces here in Canada, and there are bigger trade barriers in between province than there is with most countries across the world. Perfect example, most of the certification or accreditation does not apply to every province. So you actually have to do additional testing in a different province for you to be certified and able to actually provide services in that province, which is crazy, right? The other part of it is too, we have tariffs between different provinces, which why would we have tariffs internally? Why are we not working together to make sure that we're all successful and we're selling to each market? Because in certain cases, we should be buying product from our neighboring province instead of the US. It forces us. It also forces us to look at all markets and not rely on any country. Let's diversify our economy with Europe, with Australia, with the APAC area, with Latin America. Let's figure out new partners. And if we do still do a ton of trade with the US in the future, that's fine, right? But we have other alternatives. What's your take? Do you think in the long run, this is actually going to be good for Canada?
I hope it will be good because that's what we need. Like we need changes regardless of tariffs. This should have happened years ago. Like in terms of, I mean, even within provinces, there's invisible borders, if you will, in terms of everyone wants a piece of a pie that's not big enough. And so you mentioned like accreditation licenses and such, and you look even employment laws. Every province has their own employment laws, employment standards. And like, why? We're Canada. We're a country. I would understand every country should probably have their own employment laws, but within the country, like it makes no sense to have a standard that differs from one province to another province. There's literally like hundreds of these different scenarios that we're not even going to have time to get into today. Like there's just so much that makes no sense. And I don't think anyone's really paid attention to it. And then as far as like the tariffs between provinces, I do get it. Like the tariffs, if they're done right, they make sense. Like every province has strengths and weaknesses. And so the tariffs are kind of there to try to balance it out, where it's like, we're sending you all of our whatever natural resources to do this. And then in return, we're buying this, but you're not always buying at the same levels. And so the tariffs are existed to balance this out. The way they're being done now in the US, they're just being done by a giant baby who's doesn't really even understand tariffs. But tariffs within provinces, like they'll probably all need to be reviewed. But I'm not sure that they're a bad thing if they actually don't prevent businesses from buying elsewhere, because they can get at least at the same price and the same quality without having to pay a premium to buy from a neighboring provinces versus buying from another country.
Well, that's an interesting perspective. I did not expect you to say that. Like, maybe you're right, but this is where I see as a country, we have equalization, right? I know it because I know how much money that Alberta sends to the rest of the country. So this is where, okay, well, at the end of the day, we're all doing the same thing. We're all doing our part.
Yeah.
And I still don't see the reason. You're going to have to go way deeper of what those tariffs interprovincially mean and how it makes sense.
But the equalization payments are literally like, they fill up the government coffers. Some of it goes like gets trickled, but equalization payments don't benefit the companies directly. In a lot. So that's where tariffs can create that balance if it's done right. But
I agree with this article saying, look, in the long run, we got to get our act together. We got to make sure that we're working within the province well together. We're finding new partners. And if we do that, our reliance on the US or any country goes down. And I think in the long run, that's going to be good for us.
we needed a kick in the ass. So we are not business oriented enough as a country. And we lack the aggressiveness of a lot of other businesses that are out there. And we're just literally taxing ourselves to death with governments trying to recoup from every possible channels that are out there to recoup dollars from. It's not just tariffs that are a threat to Canadian businesses. It's the US is laxing a lot of business operational laws. And then you look at businesses in Canada, they're going to go, hey, you know what? Cost for me to move south of the border is going to be expensive, but within 5 years, when they recoup, and our company's going to be in a much better position than we are in Canada right now.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because that is 100% correct. Companies, instead of paying the tariffs, are just going to move operations into the U.S., especially if they already kind of have operations in the U.S. But to your point, and this week I saw a chart of the top 20 biggest companies in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So Shopify is number 2.
Yeah.
So kudos to Shopify, which is a very proud Canadian business, and they've done a good job. But I think there is the likelihood they could move to the US if it becomes a challenge. But most of the companies in the top 10, they're all banks.
Yeah.
Like the top companies in Canada are not diversified. We don't manufacture anything in Canada from what I could see. We don't really have any industry when you look at those top 20. Then you look at the US and you even look at Europe. It's very diversified.
Yeah, we have everything we need to build the right business environments in Canada, but there's no competition. There's a lack of, like, even on productivity, we rank like I think 26 in the world right now, and productivity per hour worked. So there's all kinds of things that we needed to fix regardless. And so, yeah, my biggest concern is whether we can move quickly enough, because yes, like it could be good for Canada. I agree with that article. I also felt the same even before you shared the article, that it's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
But like anything else, can we move quickly enough? This should be as big, or if not bigger, than the impact the pandemic would have on the Canadian business landscape. Like this is just as big, if not bigger. So we need to move with the same urgency, and we need to figure out like what needs to happen.
We have to learn from our mistakes with the pandemic of just printing so much money to causing massive inflation. I am not in the camp of let's just give everyone checks. It's more on remove the regulations in cases that need to be, remove the taxes that don't need to exist. Like, make it easier to do business in Canada. And even before this happened, we were going to implement a massive new capital gains tax, which will drive more businesses out of Canada. Like, policy wise, it's been a disaster.
It has been. Yeah. No, 100%. Fun fact, Serge, I'm all about fun facts. Did you know that Alberta and New Brunswick are the two most exposed provinces to tariffs in the U.S.?
Yes. St. John, New Brunswick being
literally
number one.
We're literally the same. Like Alberta and New Brunswick, like we're basically like
Yeah.
equal
Well,
contributors to the economy.
well, St. John, New Brunswick is number one, and Calgary, where I'm at, is number two. But it's not going to be boring for the next 4 years. But you know what is going to be a little bit boring? We're going to put a little bit of a hiatus on this podcast to try to figure out what the next evolution of Beacon Bits is going to look like. What do you think?
What did you say? What?
Hiatus?
Oh.
Hiatus? Hiatus?
I wasn't going to let you get away with not calling out on one of those.
Yeah, absolutely. But I've been pretty good. I've been practicing. I've been hooked on phonics just to make sure I can say multi-syllable words.
You're doing good, Serge. You're doing good.
Well, this has been fun, though. But I think there's a lot of concepts, a lot of ideas, and we're going to keep improving it eventually. But in the meantime, it's going to be a little bit break. But for anyone that's been listening, we appreciate it, first of all, and would love to get your feedback on what do you want Beacon Bits to be? Like, what's interested you? What type of content? Do you want to see interviews? Do you want to see more people coming in? Like, we're completely open to any suggestions. So if you're listening to us, like, definitely reach out to myself or Yves and give us some feedback.
Getting emotional. Can we add tears after? Like,
yeah, we can.
Yeah,
we can. Anything to add before we go, Yves?
No, I actually don't think it's the end of the podcast. I really enjoyed it.
I never said it was.
Yeah,
there you go, not listening.
Well, it's the end of the world, and we're shutting it down, and we're going to go live in the bunker. That's what you said. So, but
we might have to.
I really enjoy doing this with you. There's never any lack of things to talk about. So I think I just got to figure out how I can stay healthy for a long enough stretch to not have to postpone recordings all the time. So hopefully this is the last, setback for me for a while, and then I can go resume my NHL career, and then we can continue the podcast.
All right, audience. That's it for Beacon Bits for a little bit, but we appreciate it. Au revoir.